All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this virtual village board meeting to order. On Monday, December 21, 2020, we're meeting virtually again this evening because it is not yet practical or prudent to meet in person. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, and so I'd ask if you'd all please rise and join the village board in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee LaBedz,
Here.
Trustee Scaletta,
Here.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Here.
Trustee Padovani,
Here.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Here.
Trustee Canty,
Here.
Trustee Baldino,
Here.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Here.
President Hayes.
Here. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes, and we have 3 sets to approve tonight. The first is from the Committee of the Whole meeting from November 9, 2020. Are there any changes or passes?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Canty, seconded by Trustee Rosenberg. If no further questions or comments from the board or the audience, I see none. Roll call.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Next are the Committee of the Whole meeting minutes from our meeting on December 7, 2020. Any changes or passes on that one?
Move approval.
Second.
A motion to approve by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. If no questions from the board or from the audience, I see none. Roll call.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. And then finally, our minutes from the village board meeting from December 7, 2020. Any changes or passes?
Move approval. Second.
A motion to approve by Trustee Padovani, seconded by Trustee Baldino. If no questions or comments from the board or the audience, seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Next is the approval of the accounts payable, and I call on Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I move approval of the warrant register with a check date of December 15, 2020 in the amount of $1,538,527.23.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Rosenberg, seconded by Trustee Scaletta. Any questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. We'll move on then to citizens to be heard. And Becky, can you confirm we have not received any comments in advance of the meeting? Is that right?
I did not, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the audience who wish to address the board on an item not on the agenda under citizens to be heard? I see no hands being raised, and so we will move on then in the agenda to the consent agenda. Are there any members of the village board that wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, our trustee Rosenberg.
Mayor, I'd like to remove consent legal B, please.
Okay, that's the resolution regarding the approving a redevelopment agreement between the village and Town and Country Chicago Associates LLC regarding the Town and Country Shopping Center at 445 East Palatine Road. That shall be removed. Any other requests for removal from the village board? Any requests for removal from the audience? Seeing none, would any board member like to vote no or pass on any remaining item on the consent agenda?
Move approval.
Second.
A motion to approve the remaining items by trustee Tinaglia, seconded by trustee LaBedz. Any questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call on the remaining items.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta.
Yes.
Trustee Padovani.
Yes.
Trustee Canty.
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes, we'll take up the removed item under legal in our agenda and then move to new business. And we do have one item to consider tonight. That's the land use variation request by Little University Child Care Center to be located at 2501 North Chestnut Avenue. Is the petitioner present, a representative from the petitioner?
Mayor, it looks like
Yeah.
Mindy Yoon is an attendees. She is the petitioner.
Yeah, I do see Mindy Yoon there. Mindy, are you with us? There you go. If you could unmute yourself, if you would. There you go.
Hello. Yes.
Mindy, we've got your materials, but why don't you please tell us what you're looking to do here?
We request for a land variation because we are a child care center and we are moving into the church, and that church used to be an elementary school. So there isn't any changes to the the purpose of the building. So yeah, we're a daycare center and we want to be in a daycare building that used to have daycare in previous time.
Okay, we may have some questions for you in just a minute, but why don't we, if you have no other presentation, we'll proceed to the staff presentation and then entertain questions after that. So, Mr. Perkins, do you have anything?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. What is being sought here this evening is a special use, a land use variation for a daycare within the building that used to be an elementary school, and then later on housed Glencourt Educational Center. And then in 2015, a parking variation was received for Holy Nation Presbyterian Church. So the daycare Little City is seeking the land use variation approval. It's about a 1,500 square foot space within the building. It requires about 5 parking spaces per our village ordinance. There are 62 spaces on site with a further 35 spaces that are land banked. The peak number of vehicles that would be observed on the property with the daycare during the week was about 7 spaces, so there should be sufficient parking. The operations of the daycare don't really conflict with the church, which is primarily in the evening and on the weekends. So the petitioner did move into the building without the approvals. That was back in, I believe, February. We received a complaint. They were notified to either cease or submit an application to receive this land use variation. Then with COVID-19, they ceased their petition for a while and then reoccupied the building again. and we reached out to them again to get them to move forward with their application. So the Plan Commission did recommend approval of the land use variation. There have been a couple of code enforcement issues that were observed during this process. The first being the landscaping. Staff inspected the site in February, in September, October, and again in December. And there are a number of trees that are missing. The maintenance of the property has been in pretty poor shape. And also some of the perimeter landscaping screening the parking lot. There have been some improvements made in the fall, but not up to our requirements. Given the winter months, we've given the property owner, this is on the property owner, not the applicant, which is just going to be a tenant in the building. So the property owner has been given a deadline to restore the landscaping in the area by middle of May of 2021. We also received a complaint during the hearing process in October about a wall sign that was installed. We checked that out, and they did submit for a sign permit, but the sign was not installed in compliance with the permit. And the sign code does not allow internally illuminated signs in this particular district across from residential. It does allow a halo type sign where the sign face is opaque and doesn't allow light to emit through that, but it kind of gives a halo background effect. And that was what was originally proposed in the permit. So code enforcement has gone back out and advised the property owner of the non-compliance. A permit was resubmitted in early December to correct that action, correct the sign. And we believe that's going to take place shortly, and then we'll re-inspect it. We've also advised the church that the sign cannot be illuminated between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. because it's across from residential single-family homes. So that's a quick update on the code enforcement actions. As I'd mentioned, Plan Commission and staff recommended approval of the land use variation for the 1,500 square foot daycare facility with a maximum capacity of 20 students. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Just for clarification, I know there was some question at the Plan Commission hearing as to whether or not the so-called landlord issues or code enforcement issues could be made conditions of approval of this particular application. I'm glad to see that or hear that there's been progress on those issues, but can we make those conditions of approval of this particular application?
We probably could, and we have with larger tenants, and our practice for small tenants, we haven't tried to put that burden on them and hold them up, so to speak. The landscaping right now could not be corrected due to the winter weather. So if they don't comply by middle of May, then we would issue a citation, an official citation, and then go to through the court process to try to get that corrected. They are in the process of correcting the sign. They've submitted for that permit. That permit with the corrections have been approved, so I would anticipate that being corrected shortly.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to do that, but I am glad that at least these issues were brought to light as a result of this application, and that progress is definitely being made, because I think the residents are entitled to ensuring that this property, which is in view from their residence, is properly maintained. And so thank you for your involvement in that. Questions from the board? Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. Charles, I have a couple questions for you. The first one is, with regard to the sign, they pulled a permit and there was an inspection done. I guess that's a question. Was there an inspection done of the sign when the permit was pulled?
I'd have to verify with building whether a nighttime inspection was done, but the sign meets the size criteria. And I think until we had a complaint, nobody really knew that it had been installed incorrectly with a fully internally illuminated face instead of the halo effect that it was supposed to have.
And I'm no sign expert, but isn't there a huge difference between an internally illuminated sign and one with a halo effect that would be visible even during the day?
You probably wouldn't notice a difference during the day. I'm assuming the sign wouldn't be turned on during the day. So the only difference in the sign is that instead of the lettering, emitting light through it, it's a opaque they'll put a film over it to make it opaque, and then the light would emit behind the sign. It's a more subtle way of lighting a sign in the evening, but you wouldn't really know during the daytime the difference.
So was there a sign contractor involved in the installation of the sign?
Yes. And they have been spoken to as well with the corrected permit that they submitted to make sure that they are going to, in fact, do this correctly.
I mean, it's a little bit disturbing that someone applies for a permit, gets approval, and then installs a sign that goes against our own code. And we don't catch it because obviously we're not doing enforcement in the evenings. But I would imagine that that sign company knew when they were installing an illuminated sign, internally illuminated sign, that that was not what was applied for.
Yeah, I mean, Trustee Scaletta, I can't speak to what the sign company, whether they did it deliberately or it was by mistake, but there is a sign company involved. I would imagine it is their error. I'm sure it wasn't the landlord's, property owner's error, because the permit was issued correctly the first time around. So it was a mistake somewhere on the side of the sign company. And again, since we've notified them, they've resubmitted on December 7th a corrected sign. We approved it on the 11th. We called them to make sure they do it correctly, and we'll have to go out, now it's darker earlier, we'll have to go out and inspect it once it's done.
Okay, and we have all our ducks in a row, so in the event that the landlord is not compliant with everything that they've agreed to in the past, that citations will be issued?
Yes, they've been given in writing a deadline of May 15th for the landscaping. And if it's not installed or corrected by then a citation would be issued, and then we'd go take them through the channels to try to force corrective action.
Okay. I mean, I think it's important that, that we recognize that, this is in the middle of a residential neighborhood, and that schools and churches are zoned residential. And that's because they're supposed to fit in with the character of the neighborhood. And I'm just kind of disappointed that the landowner has fallen through the cracks so many times to the detriment of the surrounding neighbors. So I would hope that staff has the landowner on their radar, and will make sure that they're compliant with all the codes that they've agreed to.
Yes, and Trustee Scaletta, if I can add, the planner that handled this, Jake, he has reached out to the property owner that has voiced their concern and notified us of this issue, and he has Jake's contact information. We've asked him to let us know if they see anything else so we can address it right away. We don't have enough staff to be out in the field all of the time, so we do rely on the residents, in a particular area to let us know, and then we will follow up accordingly. And I concur, they need to correct these things in a timely fashion so they can be a good neighbor.
Okay, thanks.
All right, other questions from the board? Seeing none, are there any questions from the audience? All right, I see none. What's the will of the board? Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you. I would move approval of the land use variation to allow a daycare center in the R3 zoning district with the variations and recommendations from the Plan Commission.
Second.
Motion by Trustee LaBedz, second by Trustee Baldino. Any further questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
yes,
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
yes,
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, Ms. Yoon, congratulations. You have been approved, and we wish you much success with your child care center at this location. So good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Right, there is no other new business, and so we'll move on to the legal item that was removed from the consent agenda. Mr. Reckles, you want to introduce that item?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. Tonight, we're looking for approval of a resolution that would allow us to enter into a redevelopment agreement for relating to a project or two projects in Town and Country Shopping Center. This would bring about a re-tenanting of the vacant grocer space and the redevelopment of a vacant outlot for a fast casual restaurant. The property owner, Visconsi Properties, has requested financial assistance through our tax increment financing district, which is in that area. This money would not be going towards the tenants that would be coming in, but rather would be going towards physical improvement costs, primarily demolition, roof replacement, renovation, environmental abatement, and site work. And Mr. Perkins can talk a little bit more about the details of this agreement and what we're looking to accomplish.
Thank you, Village Manager Reckles. Yes, this is in TIF District number 5. There was, for those of you on the board, back in 2005, recall, that's when this district was created, and it does expire in 2028. TIF funds can only be used within the district that's designated, so it can only be used within Town and Country and South Point shopping centers. No other areas can funds from this district be used in any other areas. The request is for 1.399 million in TIF assistance that would be paid out in phases. The TIF has a fund balance of $3,150,000. So there are funds available currently in the TIF 5 fund. And then next year with the property tax increment, that fund balance would increase, except for additional expenses or expenditures that the village board may propose. So that, as Randy mentioned, TIF funds would not go to the tenants themselves. They would go towards physical improvements, extending utility lines, renovation and complete replacement of the roof in the former grocery tenant space. As the board is aware, it's very difficult to get retail tenants in this time period. It's even more difficult during COVID. It was very difficult pre-COVID. Many shopping centers are seeing retail tenants leave. They're seeing retail spaces being converted to non-sales tax generating uses. There are even tenants in Randhurst Village in Mount Prospect that are announcing their closing. So we're fortunate we've got 2 tenants that are looking to move forward into TIF 5. The one would be a grocer in the former Dominic space. That space has been vacant for 5 years since the Joe Caputo's and Sons occupied the space. It was only occupied by Caputo's for less than a year. And prior to that, it was vacant as well. So it's been a long-term vacancy in the shopping center. Typically, grocery anchored shopping centers tend to do better than non-grocery anchored shopping centers, especially recently, because they do bring in foot traffic into the center. There are a couple other significant vacancies in the shopping center. The former Marshalls that relocated across the street and downsized. Other tenants are looking at downsizing as well. So this is an opportunity to try to stabilize the shopping center. There are TIF eligible costs that are outlined in the agreements that comply with the state statute. The funding would only be paid out upon completion of certain actions, and money would be paid out to the landlords based upon completing improvements. So for the grocery anchor tenant, approximately $500,000 would be paid out after completion of the roof restoration and completion of that. And also upon receipt of a building permit for the build out by the tenant that would go into that space. The final payment towards that component of the project would not be made until there was a certificate of occupancy issued. And then with the fast casual restaurant, a similar approach. $100,000 would be paid out 45 days after completion of extension of utilities. There are a big cost to get to the site and also footings and foundation for that tenant. So we would know that tenant is moving forward. And then the final payment for the fast casual restaurant would also not be paid out until certificate of occupancy for that tenant. So we have been working with Visconti companies for well over a year on this. There's been a number of stop-starts with the tenants in getting this to this point. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Also at the meeting is Dominic Visconti and Alan Prince from Visconti companies. They're the owner of the shopping center. So I'd be happy to answer any specific questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Perkins. Before we go to the board for questions, I do see Mr. Patel is joining us on the meeting tonight. Mr. Patel, if you were here for the lease agreement between the village and the train station for the Gateway newsstands, that has already been approved under the consent agenda. So there's no need for you to stick around. So we move on then in the agenda to village board questions on the redevelopment agreement. And Trustee Rosenberg asked for this to be removed. So I'm going to go to Trustee Rosenberg first.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Visconti and Mr. Prince, for your continued support of our shopping center. So, and being in Arlington Heights all these years. So thanks again. So I just wanted to clarify or get clarified for my information is so the number that was given to us, Charles, was almost $14.5 million. So of which improvements are going to be made. Now those improvements for that amount of money are not going to be paid by Visconti. Those are going to be paid by the tenants. Is that correct?
Trustee Rosenberg, it's a combination of both. So the total project costs are estimated at about $14.5 million. Of that, the developer costs, meaning the Visconti property owner costs, are $2.4 million. And of that, $1.399 million are the TIF eligible costs that are identified in the agreement.
So our payment of the 1.399 is going to reimburse Visconti as part of that 2.409 number, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So when in your initial remarks, you mentioned that as part of the 1.399 million, it wasn't going to go toward the, I think, I'm not sure I don't remember the exact words you used, but to the actual development of the building, but yet, we're putting in approximately $700,000 for roof replacement. So isn't that really considered as part of the structure then?
It is renovation of the existing structure, but it's not, it's the landlord developer costs as opposed to the tenant interior build out and the tenant facade or fixturing costs.
But it's really for that specific space though.
It is for that space. That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So it's kind of a misnomer there.
So it's to get the space, both the costs for both of these tenants are to get the space or the site ready for the tenant. So the landlord has work to do as part of their agreement with the tenant. In the case of the grocer, to demo the interior of the space, completely repair and redo the roof as an example. And for the fast casual restaurant on the outlot, part of their costs are to extend utilities to that location because there are no utilities in that area, and then do some other site restoration work and access drive improvements.
So really, so their outlay is approximately $1 million versus our outlay out of the TIF funds is 1.4, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
Anything else, Trustee Rosenberg?
That's it for the moment.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe Mr. Visconsi could tell us a little bit more about some of the concessions that he has made that we are not aware of. Because I would imagine that if we're putting in 1.4 and he's putting in 1 million, that maybe we're not seeing some of the costs of reduced rent or rent forgiveness or some other terms of the lease that we're not privy to. Because I agree with Trustee Rosenberg, it seems a little bit odd that we would put more forward with taxpayer dollars than the developer is. And so there's got to be some reason for this, because I can't imagine staff would bring it to us if there wasn't more to it. So, Mr. Visconsi?
Thank you. I can answer that, and I can also, when I finish, ask Mr. Prince, our CFO, to possibly elaborate on my answer. But you hit the nail on the head. It's with one of your comments, it's a very low rent lease, although we are under a very strict non-disclosure agreement with the tenant, and I'm not able to disclose specific terms. I will say that we began negotiating with the tenant a little over 2 years ago. And originally, we were not structured in this way, that it was a much higher contribution and a much higher rent. That negotiation died in the spring of 2019. We were able to revive the project in February of 2020, and under a totally different structure, we're eventually able to arrive at a signed lease. And it's because of that low rent, relatively low rent and low contribution, that we were able to move forward and successfully come to a meeting of the minds at something that we could make work for the center. Mr. Perkins made some comments about retail in general that I would like to reiterate. It's a bit of an understatement, I think, to say that grocery anchored shopping centers perform better than shopping centers that are not anchored with a grocery store. That is very important these days. We, I believe, lost our Marshall's store to the shopping center across the street because we did not have an operating grocery tenant in the center. And I believe we could have retained them had we had a grocery store. So I apologize. I'm probably giving you more information than you had asked for. But again, those were the basic reasons for the reduced contribution. It's the reduced rent in the lease.
Go ahead,
So
Trustee.
ask you this, which shopping center did Marshalls go into?
I don't recall the name of the center, but it's the Jewel anchored center across the street from Town and Country.
They went to North Point, Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Charles. So, Mr. Visconsi, I mean, isn't it possible that they wanted to be closer to other, clothing retailers than they necessarily wanted to be closer to a grocer? I mean, in all reality, the grocer in your shopping center is at the other side of the shopping center. I would think that, maybe it had more to do with being closer to a clothing retailer than it had to do with being closer to a grocer.
Well, I can only go from experience and what I've seen over the years. And Marshall's, as a general rule, really looks to be with with a supermarket. And it's the other fashion retailers that then tend to go along with Marshalls to be closer to them, the smaller fashion tenants. I believe that's why we were in negotiation with a large shoe store at the time, and when Marshalls departed, those negotiations ended. They follow the larger box fashion retailers, but you could be correct. They definitely like to be with fashion, but it's that daily grocery use that's really important, and the primary, the majority of shoppers that do the grocery shopping probably are the typical Marshalls and TJ Maxx shoppers as well.
Okay. And so this is for either you or Mr. Prince. Why do you think that it makes sense that the village has a larger investment in this deal of 1.4 million versus your 1 million?
Well, I think it's a benefit to the community. It's a benefit to the shopping center. We're bringing in a new retailer that's not in the area. It benefits the community by adding competition in the grocery sector. It keeps the center viable. I think that's a very important addition to the shopping center. And frankly, as anchor tenant leases expire and have expired over the years, rents have been decreasing. We are receiving a lower rent today from Dick's Sporting Goods than we were 15 years ago. Same is the case. It's the same case with Best Buy and others. And from an economic standpoint, we've reached a place where we were able to revive. I was frankly surprised that we were able to revive this deal that had died and had been dead for well over 6 months, in the manner that we did, and particularly in the economic climate we were going through since March, since we only revived it a month before that. I think it benefits the community, and it benefits the center to revive it in a big way.
Well, I think it's important. I think it's important that we have a shopping center that is stable, and I think it's important for the corridor, and not only for the shopping center, but also for the corridor. Do you have any potential leads on tenants for the vacant space of Marshalls now that you'll have this new grocer and a new tenant in the outlot?
We have not had enough time to properly market the fact that we have this new tenant. The lease was signed fairly recently, and word is getting out. I would say as of today, we don't have an active lead for the vacant Marshalls space, but I'm confident that within the next 12 months we will.
Trustee Scaletta, if I could expound on that just a tiny bit, please. First, with respect to re-tenanting the vacant Marshalls box, so we are under a non-disclosure agreement with the grocer, so we can do no marketing whatsoever. We haven't broadcast it to the market. We haven't really started our marketing efforts. We're optimistic that with the quality of the grocer that we're bringing in, that we hope to bring in, that we will have good reception from interesting, new, fresh, exciting uses, one or more. So that's that. But I'd like to go back to your prior question as to why is it fair that proportionally the village is contributing a little bit more than the developer? We bought the shopping center, this mall, I should say, in August of 1999. So we've been in the community for some 21 years. We demalled it in 2005. That's the current phase that malls are going through now, that have been going through for 10 years. So we were probably a little bit early on the demoling phase, and that's probably a good thing. We landed several good tenants, Best Buy, Dick's, Ashley Furniture, Marshall's. Over the course of the past 15 years, retailing has changed significantly, especially in the past 6 to 9 months. Internet retailing is all the fad, all the phase. With some of our vacancies, for example, and I'm sorry, I'm looking off to the side for my notes, I apologize. In 2015, Ashley Furniture vacated their leased premises. We backfilled that with LA Fitness. The cost to backfill that, I went back and reviewed the records over the past few days, approximately $5.2 million. At no point in time did we ask for any participation from the village. We believe that was a good use for the community. While it may not be a tax generating use necessarily, it stabilizes, it participates in the stabilization of the shopping center, brings more daily traffic, so on and so forth. So again, $5.2 million that we invested with no request for assistance whatsoever. Additionally, several years ago, June of 16, the Hometown Buffet stopped operating. They occupied about 11,000 square feet. We did replace that tenant with Golden Corral, a very similar use. It was certainly enjoying good operations, good results until COVID-19 hit. They're currently suffering, just like every other sit-down restaurant. But we invested some $260,000 to consummate the Golden Corral lease. And that Golden Corral's lease is 26% lower than Hometown Buffet's lease rental rate was. Mr. Visconti mentioned Dick's Sporting Goods. They're paying 8% less today than in 2006. Best Buy is paying 8% less today than they were paying in 2006. I did not do the math. I would assume that with inflation, 15 years, probably 20%. So we're probably 28% lower than what we should be if you ratchet it back to 2006. So that is just an idea of the significant cash flow pressures that the shopping center has been experiencing for many years. This really started in probably 2012, 13, 14. I hope that gives you some insight that this is not just a one-time event. This is a gradual decline that the retailing industry has been experiencing, reduced rental rates, reduced box sizes. Retailers are endeavoring to become more efficient, and the pressures are land essentially solely on the landlord's back. And so this is just one of those times where for the past 21 years, we've endeavored to be an upstanding citizen of the community. Every year we have the Santa Claus charity event. This year, because of COVID-19, and clearly that did not occur. And so this is just after 21 years of good corporate citizenship, and after 21 years of us investing our own money, this is the time where, in order to truly ensure that the shopping center can continue to be an active participant in the daily life of the community, this is why we're making that request. And we've invested significant sums of money into the shopping center over the past 21 years.
Thank you, Mr. Prince. I appreciate that. I think that every shopping center owner is finding a way to revitalize their center and make it so that the center exists. And it doesn't help that the Cook County assessor is making it more difficult on commercial properties. I guess the reason I was asking the questions that I'm asking is that, we've also been a participant in Town and Country because we have provided TIF funds in the past. And so a lot of my questions not only have to do with what we're going to do tonight, but that you understand that, you know, if you re-tenant Marshalls, that we're not going to be able to be there every single time that you re-tenant a space. And I think what you guys are doing right now is important to the viability of the shopping center. But we can't be a willing participant every time that the shopping center is bringing in a new tenant. And I think that these circumstances are a little bit unique. But, you know, there's 9 of us. And if we don't ask you questions, we wouldn't be doing our jobs, because we are the stewards of the taxpayer dollars. And that's what's most important, is making sure that whatever money we put forward is in good faith and is you know, is going to be used wisely and isn't seen as, you know, as a government handout. And so that's why we're asking these questions. And I think it's really important that we do, because there's some that are going to be skeptical. There's going to be an awful lot of sales tax revenue that's going to be generated from the grocer and from the outlot. And those are important. But it's also equally important that we make sure that we understand exactly where the tax dollars are going, and that we have a comfort as a board that that shopping center is going to be viable for years to come. And then we're not just putting a Band-Aid on the shopping center. And many, many commercial properties are struggling now. And you're not the only ones that have had to make reductions in rent. And especially during COVID. During COVID, many, many landlords are making reductions in rent because they have no choice. It's either that or you lose a tenant and you have to start all over again. So I can appreciate your comments, both you and Mr. Visconsi, but these are difficult questions, but they have to be asked by this board.
And we appreciate your oversight and your diligence. We sure do.
All right, thank you, Trustee Scaletta. Any further questions from the village board? Trustee Schwingbeck. Tom, you're still on mute.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
Just a couple of quick questions, Mr. Prince and Mr. Visconti. If we get the green light on this, when are these 2 tenants going to be up, running, and generating business?
Alan, would you like to take that?
I sure will. Based upon the latest information we have, we reasonably believe that both tenants will be open by the end of 2022. 2021. That being said, we do not necessarily control when each tenant might open. But based upon the feedback we've received, we believe that plus or minus 12 months is very reasonable. We would hope that the QSR, the fast casual restaurant, would open sooner than 12 months. That's our plan. That's our hope.
Okay. And Charles, maybe you could answer this one. So having them both up and running, if we start, let's say January 1 of 2022, any estimate of what kind of sales tax this could be bringing in with these 2 tenants a year to the village?
Yeah, typically a fast casual restaurant, based upon this particular one's national average sales per unit, would be around 90 to 100,000 in sales tax. The grocer, based upon our knowledge of other grocers in the area, and this one could be a little bit higher, could be anywhere from 200 to 350, somewhere in that range, perhaps even a bit higher than that, but I don't want to overestimate.
Okay.
If I could jump into Trustee Schwingbeck, we don't know that those are net sales tax figures, because there will be, of course, anytime there's a new business in a developed market such as ours, a little bit of give and take with existing restaurants and grocers. And so, but given that both of these players were interested in entering our market anyways, we would rather capture that new revenue within Arlington Heights and have it go to Mount Prospect or Palatine.
Right. Thank you very much.
Right. Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of follow-up questions based on Trustee Schwingbeck's questions. Charles, when you suggest like the fast casual $90,000 to $100,000, is that the village's portion or the entire sales tax revenue?
That's the village's portion.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're clarifying because, you know, if we had to take our portion out of $100,000, it wouldn't be as much, obviously.
Correct. That's that's a 2% sales tax and a 1 1/4 food and beverage tax based upon this restaurant's average unit sales across the country.
Okay, thank you. And then last question for the petitioners. So I understand that you can't control when the tenants open, but when do they start paying rent?
Rent commences upon opening or an outside date after our delivery or after completion of our work. I don't recall the time period after our delivery, after which rent would commence. And Alan, I don't know if you've got that handy, and it's possibly something that the grocer lease doesn't allow us to disclose, but we do know that both tenants are very eager and geared up, excited to be there, excited to get open as soon as they can. Any additional information on how long they have to get open, Alan, after delivery that you could add at this point?
With respect to the grocer, that would be a confidential lease term that we are prohibited from disclosing pursuant to the lease agreement and the non-disclosure agreement we had to sign. But it is what I will call commercially reasonable terms for both tenants. And speaking with respect to fast food restaurants, QSR restaurants, in our experience in other markets and other tenants, it's usually plus or minus 180 days. From when we'll say the outside delivery date or the permit issuance date. We understand that the QSR is already into the city for their permits or plan reviews. And we understand that the grocer may be submitting very shortly. With respect to the grocer, it's a more complicated build out, much more costly, much more lengthy build out. And so it's very safe to assume that because of that complexity, it's going to be a little longer than what I'll call the standard 180-day build out time frame. But both of them rent would commence inside of 12 months.
Okay, yeah, I would assume so, or else that would be a bad deal for you. And you know, and I appreciate that the Outlot QSR wants to get moving. I would have thought, I mean, we approved that like a year ago, so I'm kind of surprised that they haven't been building as of yet. And we'll take your word that the grocer is going to get moving as soon as possible. And I can appreciate the fact that you can't go against the confidentiality that you've agreed to. So, thank you, Mayor. I have no other questions.
All right, any other questions from the village board? Seeing none. Any questions from the audience on this agenda item? I see none. What's the will of the board in terms of the recommended resolution?
I would move approval.
Second.
I'm sorry, was that Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Trustee Scaletta made the motion and Trustee Baldino was the second. Any further questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Well, Mr. Visconsi and Mr. Prince, thank you for your contributions and input tonight. And we very much appreciate your assistance in getting this moving forward as expeditiously as possible for the benefit of you and your tenants and the village as a whole. So good luck to you as we move forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your assistance, and we're excited to be moving forward.
All right.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.
Right, there is no other legal business, and so we move on to the report of the village. Move on to the report of the village manager. Mr. Recklaus?
Thank you, Mayor. As you all recall, back in May, when we were still kind of in the throes or coming out of the throes of our stay-at-home order, the village acted to provide some assistance to our businesses that were impacted negatively by the stay-at-home order, and with a particular focus on restaurants. And at that time, the board directed staff to reduce liquor fees by 25%, defer a payment of our liquor license fees till later in the year. We also created a new zero-interest loan program for businesses for up to $10,000 per business with a term of 3 years. And then over the summer, the business and climate improved somewhat, and we were happy about that. And then this fall, when we saw an increase in COVID numbers, a number of new mitigation measures were put into place. And once again, we're seeing that the negative impacts, particularly once again in the restaurant community. And we know from our contacts in the restaurant community and just our own observations that with the forced closure of indoor dining and with the elimination of outdoor dining due to the weather, cash flow is an issue for many of our restaurants. And so we are proposing that the village respond to that by providing an additional 25% rebate of the village's 2020 liquor license fees for all classes of liquor licenses other than B and BB. We are not seeing as negative of an impact on our packaged liquor stores. And for those reasons, they're kind of left out of this. In some cases, packaged liquor stores we've seen are actually doing better than a typical year. The other thing that we're looking at doing is a deferral of the due date for all classes of liquor licenses from April 30th, when they're normally due, to June 30th. Our liquor license fees are sometimes, that's a large bill to pay. We know that some of our businesses kind of save that money during the holiday season when they do a little better, and that's been taken away from them. And so we want to provide a little bit of leniency and say that those payments can be due in June instead of in April. Lastly, with the small business loan program, once again, the loan was provided. These loans were provided in order to assist businesses with cash flow, and we're recommending that we defer the due date of the first payment for those loans from January of 2021 to June 1st of 2021. And so we would be looking for recommendations along those lines, if it pleases the board.
Well, thank you, Mr. Recklaus. Certainly, this is something that is important to our business community, particularly our restaurants. I know we've continually looked over the course of these last 9 months on ways to help our businesses out. And I know we'll continue to do that even after approval of these actions this evening. But thank you to the staff for looking for ways to help our businesses. Trustee Canty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Randy, you and I have talked about this before, and I echo the mayor's comment. My question is it enough to do these things? Is just deferring these payments out a few months in 2021 on this no interest loan program, is that enough to help our businesses and to make sure that they know this help is available?
I think it's a first step. Given what we're facing right now, we're closely following, obviously, the news in Washington, and that there may be additional assistance along the way. We haven't been able to really get any definitive answers as to what all that will include and for whom. but we'll be following that closely. We are having meetings with individual businesses and staying in touch, and we're going to be doing some correspondence soon, soliciting further feedback from them on these and other issues, and that'll be one of the things, as you and I discussed, that we'll be asking them. So, you know, this, if the board wishes and if there's a need, we always can take further action anytime in the future, but we think these are prudent actions to take at this time.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm very much in favor of these recommendations and also looking forward to hearing the update from you as we continue on.
Thank you, Trustee Canty. Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. I would concur with Trustee Canty. I think that we need to make sure that we're staying on top of this because I think it's really important that all of our businesses in the village succeed and don't close. But our restaurants, I mean, this is the second time that the governor has closed our restaurants. And thanks to staff for making sure that Arlington al fresco in the downtown and then just having expanded outdoor seating throughout the village, you know, is recognized. I mean, I think that was really important to these restaurants staying afloat during this difficult time. So, Randy, in the past, we did make some opportunity for the restaurants to have some kind of discount or that they didn't have to pay up front on their liquor license. Did we do something before?
Yes. So back in when these were originally due in April, initially we did a deferral, and then we ended up doing a 25% discount, and then this would be an additional 25%. So their 2020 liquor fees would be reduced by 50% for businesses in these classes from what it normally is. And so this would be the second reduction for 2020 fees.
Right. I mean, I didn't want to say this is step 2, but it really is step 2. And
Yeah.
there might be a step 3, and hopefully there's not a step 4 and that we get past this. But I think it's important that we take this step because, yes, I would like to do more, but let's see what the federal government and the state is going to do before we get too far ahead, and that we take this step by step. So I appreciate the comments of Trustee Canty because I agree. We have to make sure that we stay on top of this and we watch all of our businesses. You know, restaurants are obviously very important because they bring a lot of the foot traffic, but we have to make sure that we're watching out for all of our businesses in town to make sure that if there's something that we can do, and we can't do everything, but if there's something that we can do to help, that we're there. And so, Randy, where does this discount, where in the budget will this discount come from?
This will come out of the general fund. We estimate that the discount will cost the village about $75,000. And so it'll come from general fund reserves out of the 2020 budget.
Okay, so you say general fund, but then you also say general fund reserve. So it's really the reserves where it's coming from?
Yes.
Okay, that's where I thought it was going to come from. But when you said general fund at first, then I was like, oh, I didn't realize there was extra money in the general fund, but I get it, reserves. And that's where it should come from because our reserves have always been there in case of emergency. And we've always made sure that we don't just spend those dollars because it's convenient, but we spend them in times of emergency. And this is clearly an emergency. So thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments from the village board? I see none. Any questions or comments from the audience?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Scaletta to approve the recommendations, second by Trustee Canty. Any further questions or comments from the board or the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes?
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Mr. Ecklaus, anything else under the report of the village manager?
No, just happy holidays to everybody here and everyone watching at home.
All right, thank you. Let me just add my comments as well in terms of the holidays. And also, at the end of this very difficult 2020, this is our last village board meeting for this very challenging year. I know I, for one, am really looking forward to 2021. I do think there is light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine and our numbers finally going down in the state of Illinois. And so I am very hopeful that we will return to at least a new normal sometime in 2021, and that we can bring back hopefully a relatively full slate of community events to the village of Arlington Heights that are so vitally important to all of our residents and businesses here and really lend so much to the quality of life that we enjoy. So I just want to thank all of our residents for their voluntary compliance with all of the guidelines over the past 9 months. We have to continue to be vigilant over the course of the holiday season and in the months ahead, but I do very much appreciate your willingness to help your neighbors out. We are the city of good neighbors, and so let's continue to work through this together. I hope everyone enjoyed the Hanukkah season and that you will enjoy a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. Anything else from the village board? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Baldino, seconded by Trustee Schwingbeck. Roll call.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Again, thank you all for joining us this evening. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Good night.